to the Subway Summit webinar series. My name is Cunningham, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Student Affairs at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City. And the medical schools in our region have been at the epicenter of the worst pandemic our country has ever faced. We have learned many hard-won lessons, and among them, the importance of finding ways to make the best of a very bad situation, and to transform disruption caused by COVID-19 into disruptive innovation. We hope this summit is a contribution in that vein, and that our ability to share how we've responded and what we've learned help our colleagues across the country, all of whom are facing COVID-19 challenges, some of which are universal and others that are unique to each of our institutions. This series is made possible from the contribution of New York and New Jersey medical schools. Each will share lessons learned from surge and post-surge recovery strategies and contingency planning with the lens of diversity, equity and inclusion, communication strategies, and infection prevention. Lastly, I would like to thank the colleagues across these participating institutions and the team at the Icahn School of Medicine that have made this webinar series possible. Your contribution, collaboration, compassion, kindness, and laughter have been absolutely needed in these last 3 months, and all the more moving us forward. A special thank you to Jeff Young at the Association of American Medical Colleges, the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation, and the Associated Medical Schools of New York for supporting this effort. On behalf of everyone, we hope you enjoy the Subway Summit webinar series, COVID-19 Lessons Learned from the Epicenter.
Hi, my name is David Muller, and I'm Dean for Medical Education at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. The day I realized that the city was going to be overrun by the pandemic of COVID-19 was the day I also realized that I would have to call all of my patients who are homebound in our visiting doctors program and have a conversation with them about whether they wanted to come into the hospital if they should contract the infection or wanted to be able to die at home and receive palliative care.
Hello, my name is Todd Cassis. I'm an internist and hospitalist at the Montefiore Medical Center and the Assistant Dean for Clinical Sciences Education at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. The coronavirus pandemic has brought incredible tragedy to our region, and it's amazing to think back a few months ago when I first realized that this was something that was going to hit us in this incredibly tragic manner. It was actually February 27th, and I remember it distinctly because I'd heard there was going to be a New York Department of Health webinar open to all providers at noon, and I figured, you know what, maybe I should listen to that and learn more. I've always been interested in epidemics and infectious disease, and it was on that call that I very clearly heard our public health experts warn us that we were moving from a containment strategy to a mitigation strategy. And that immediately caused me to go to my Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education, Josh Nozanchuk, and our Executive Dean, Ed Burns, to start to plan for creating an emergency operations group that could really help lead us in this time of crisis that was definitely coming. I also happened to start on clinical service on March 11th and saw my first coronavirus patients, and our medical center's response to this really growing problem, and things became very real, very sad, but also some incredible moments during that time that have really moved me and changed me as a person, as a physician, and as a leader.
When I first realized that our region was going to be overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic, as dean, the first thing you think about after getting over the shock of this is the constituents that you are responsible for, the students, the staff, the faculty. And the first thing I thought of was to have a meeting with all of our constituents and our leaders in the school to come up with a plan to deal with the pandemic and start to adjust to the new reality.
Before we start this session, it's important that we take a few moments to talk about what's really been going on in the world around us. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities across the country. The violence that COVID-19 has done to communities of color, how different is it really than the violence that we're seeing on the streets in Louisville, Kentucky, in Minneapolis, and in southern Georgia? It is really part and parcel of the long history of violence in America against people of color. It is part of our legacy. And it is another sad piece of evidence that systemic racism leads to the unspeakable loss of life and is our nation's fatal flaw.
Hi, and again, welcome. My name is Cunningham, and as you have already heard, I am the Senior Associate Dean for Student Affairs at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City. And we welcome you today, and we hope that you're on the deck or on deck for the entire week as we engage in a series of conversations for our Subway Summit webinar series, COVID-19 Lessons Learned from the Epicenter. We really would like to bring attention to this particular session that we have added that will be hosted on Friday at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Racism, American Medicine's Fatal Flaw. It is critical that we use our voices for change, and we invite your participation to the session. You do not have to have already registered. By having access to the online event guide, you can access the webinar link for Friday. It will be a riveting conversation of colleagues from the Association of American Medical Colleges, medical students that are in powerful leadership opportunities and really have strong voices among others. So please join us, bring your colleagues, make everyone aware of this session, and help be a part of the change that is so needed in our country at this moment. In light of the incredible stress that you are experiencing in your professional and personal lives, we wanted to take a moment and be sensitive to this and to give you a chance to share what's on your mind. And so I'd like to introduce to you the platform for communication that we will be using all week long and a few times tonight. And it is called slido.com. You can access this either by going directly to a browser, slido.com, or if you take your cell phone cameras, activate your camera, hover over that code that you see in the upper left-hand corner, it will bring open a browser. And if you type in the word summit, we would like for you, in a word, describe how you're feeling in this moment. Hopeful is one of the best words to see pop up early on, but we know anxious and tired and sad. These are certainly feelings that we're sharing with our students and our colleagues. The more frequent we see the word, the larger it gets. And so no surprise that overwhelmed, exhausted, anxious, but again, to be balanced by hopefulness. Tired, absolutely. We know that this is adding to your work day, so we really appreciate you being here. Solemn and scared, resilient, frustrated, absolutely. But balance with optimism. And I think that's what this community celebrates as student affairs and other professionals in medical education space. And if we have students on with us, thank you for being here and being a part of the conversation as well. I'll give it a couple more times to see. And again, it's the overwhelming part that for the last 100 days, I can say is collectively shared with many of our presenters and within our region. And is one of the reasons we wanted to bring the Subway Summit series to life so that we could share elements of certainly times that we've been overwhelmed and those things that have pushed us a little forward into where we are today. It wouldn't be possible without the collegiality and the collaboration of the institutions that you see on our screen here. We have had a few weeks, maybe a couple of months to come together. And it's been this idea of coming together that we have found more hope and solace in our work together. And I hope that wherever it is that you're sitting, you have colleagues that you've reached out to check in on, make sure that they're doing okay, and that's been reciprocated to you as well. But the series could not have been made possible without these partnering institutions, along with the AAMC, the Associated Medical Schools of New York, as well as the Macy Junior Foundation that was large in part supportive of this webinar series. So thank you again to each and every one of these institutions for giving and sharing your stories and your experiences. The series has overall learning objectives that we would like for you to be drawn to. We also know that some of you may be interested in CME credits, and at the end of this session, you'll be directed, if you have not already registered or have been placed on the wait list within our registration process, the URL to do so, because it's that registration that enables us to forward your information on to our CME office. And they will follow up with you post-series with those guidance and next steps. But these are our overall objectives that we hope to accomplish throughout this series. And obviously within each of our sessions, we may have some additional objectives to share. So the Student Affairs webinar series, I am just incredibly fortunate to have a chance to share some space with colleagues across New Jersey and New York to share. And it's really exciting that we get started now that we're past some of our housekeeping items. But before we do, we'd like to do another check-in with you, because we hope that this webinar has reached audiences across the country and perhaps even internationally. We will have a series of presentations that will start, and we'll have a break in between for you to think about questions, although we will address all of those questions at the very end. None of our presenters have a conflict of interest to disclose for this learning session. So before we get started with our first session, let's do a check-in. We want to hear from you. So tell us, using again the Slido feature, if you're just joining, either hover the QR code with your cell phone camera or go directly to slido.com. You'll see, again, an active poll of where are you sitting today, so that we have some context to our audience. Virginia, it's all Washington, Fort Worth, Texas, fantastic. I may know some folks there. New Orleans, DC, great. Florida, Tucson, Arizona, another familiar place. Some folks in the region we expected to certainly share and continue reporting out. New Jersey, New York. So we're stretched from the Northeast to the Northwest, down to the Southwest, into the Southeast, and at least Fort Worth in the Midwest, in the Heartland section. So welcome, and I'm awfully jealous for the one that's in Hawaii. I think we would all love to join you there right now and just get a scenery change from where we've been probably in these last few weeks, months. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time to hear, certainly from just 2 states experience. And we know what we're sharing is not news to you. And so we really do respect the local context that you're experiencing, and we appreciate all of you to attend. Let's ask one more. It's important that you share with us what you hope to get out of today's session. What brought you to spending 90 minutes plus a little bit more time on another Zoom call when we are all zoomed out? So if you can, describe what you hope to get out of today's session. We hope that we can share and connect and inspire, and post-event, there will be access to these slides and a network of colleagues to learn something I never thought of regarding student affairs. And so wherever you sit and whatever role you play in your institution, thank you for sharing and being here. I think we all encourage our students to be continued learners, and we're better to do that ourselves. Connection, networking, understanding, enlightenment, perspective, how to compassionately respond. I think we've all been put to that test significantly, and how to harness our own ideas and fears and reactions while giving space to hear others' fears and concerns. We talk about it, but it's a little more difficult to do in the moment of crisis. So, well, I hope that by the end of this series and today's session, you will walk away with an idea, maybe one that can be added to already the great work that you are doing within your institutions. So with that, I think it's time that we get started and hear from the experts that are joining us today. I'm very excited to turn it over to our first presentation from Sprint to Marathon, Creating Sustainability During Uncertainty. Colleagues from Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine at Seton Hall and Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. So please welcome.
Thank you so much, Tara. My name is Lori Sullivan. I'm the Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Wellbeing at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine at Seton Hall in Nutley, New Jersey. And I'm joined today by Dr. Alicia Hurtado, who will speak to you shortly and introduce herself as well. From sprint to marathon is really an apt way to describe the feeling of how COVID-19 hit our area in March of this year. We'd like to share some of our thoughts about how we tried to sustain our medical students during this difficult time of uncertainty. We would like to begin our discussion with a brief narrative describing our student bodies and our medical schools that they attend. We felt this was important to set the stage for appreciating our comments on sustainability during uncertainty. So Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine entered its inaugural class in 2018. Yes, we currently have a total of 150 students in the first 2 years of medical school. We are a brand new medical school. As an accelerated program, our first class entered their clerkships in November of 2019 and were pulled from clinical assignments mid-March of 2020. Barely 2 rotations into their clinical year. Our campus consists of a single large building connected to a large medical research center located in suburban northern New Jersey. Students live in the surrounding communities independently, having moved here from all over the country. The Hackensack Meridian Health Network consists of 13 hospitals and more than about 200 ambulatory care centers throughout the state of New Jersey where students train. Although all classes continued remotely, most of both of our first and second year students returned to their families by April. A bit about our student wellness infrastructure is that our school is committed to integrating wellness efforts both individually and institutionally throughout the school. Currently, we have a wellness coordinator, an experienced professional in medical education, who works with a standing committee, a student committee for wellness. Next.
Hi, my name is Alicia Hurtado, and I serve as the Associate Dean for Medical Student Wellbeing at Mount Sinai. Like Lori, I want to just give a quick description of Mount Sinai, the Icahn School of Medicine. It was founded over 50 years ago. It is the medical school for the Mount Sinai Health System in New York City, which includes about 8 hospital campuses, more than 5,000 faculty, nearly 2,000 students, residents, and fellows. The medical school has about 140 students per class. We're located at the border between 2 communities that are very different socioeconomically and culturally, that of the Upper East Side and East Harlem. Our hospital system was at the epicenter of the COVID-19 crisis and response. Like all other medical schools, our students were not on the wards taking care of COVID patients. However, they very quickly organized with our support into an impressive student task force that provided much needed work, such as calling patients and providing them with COVID test results, obtaining necessary PPE, and staffing a resource navigation phone line. We have an Office of Wellbeing with a Chief Wellness Officer that collaborates closely with student affairs. Next slide. So in thinking about our approach used during these last few months, one of the things that, one of the metaphors that was coming to mind for us was that of a sprint versus a marathon. Both have end goals, which for our purposes is to help our students maintain their wellness even during crisis times. One of the things that Lori and I thought was very important to highlight as well is that one of the things that we acknowledge is that our students are quite resilient. If our students were not resilient, they wouldn't be able to be in medical school. And so one of the things that we like to emphasize is that our wellness approach comes from strengthening our students. The sprint phase was the crisis phase that we all had to endure from mid-March until about the end of April. During a sprint, you start off fast, it is high intensity, and similarly, during this crisis period, we worked at a fast pace. We were reactive, responding to the needs as they arose. However, because of the fast pace, it was quickly exhausting for all of us, including our students, our staff, and faculty. By early May, it seemed as if we were starting to find a steady rhythm. We have now entered the marathon phase. Programming and interventions are already in place, and so it does not feel like we are creating and reacting as needs arise. It is during this maintenance or marathon phase that we were able to pause and begin to anticipate needs. For example, it became apparent to us that we needed to bring our community together and create a space to mourn those that we have lost, to support one another. We're currently planning on the commemoration event for our medical school community. We now have the luxury to pause, catch our breaths, and ensure that we take care of ourselves and recover in case we have to face another crisis and sprint again. I'm passing it on to Lori.
So Tara, if you can go back one slide, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. The sprint phase goals. I just like to review that. To sprint means obviously to run at full speed. So what did this look like for us in mid-March as COVID-19 arrived in relation to the wellness of our medical students? First, we needed to assess the safety of our students. Remember, students were just removed from clerkships, and a number of them would need to be informed and followed for exposure to COVID over the first few weeks. They would need to be quarantined and then followed up with to ensure their concerns about infecting others and getting sick themselves were attended to. Other students were very anxious to travel home. If you recall, travel at that time was severely curtailed. So students were the worried well for some time as they waited to return home. Many lived alone. To assess safety, we ended up contacting each student via phone, email, or text to ensure first that they knew of our concern and to literally check in with them. Second, knew how to reach us, that they were available and knew how to reach us if there was any change, since we were no longer in the building of the medical school. Third, it allowed us to check in about their basic needs. Did they have funds? Did they have food? We were sheltering in place at that point, and it was very frightening. It all provided us with an opportunity to remind them that all activities related to supporting others, the hospitals, the community, should be done remotely for the moment. They were very anxious and enthusiastic to help, and they needed to remain remote. Secondly, assessing basic needs was done simultaneously with checking on safety and a plan for follow-up. Mental health support was considered a basic need, so all previously relied upon services for counseling and crisis support for students were verified as available, and students were informed of this, even if it was just virtually. Third, the effective communication was essential and needed to be focused, directive, and repeated in multiple formats. For example, wellness information was delivered to students about how to cope with loss and how to tolerate the unknown. This was all sent at strategic times. A virtual town hall for all students with lots of faculty and staff joining with updates from the deans was one avenue that always began with a COVID-19 update by a faculty member right in the hospital. A very important and moving beginning to our virtual town halls. And an anonymous avenue for students to send their concerns and questions to be responded to was also offered to all students. Finally, a weekly newsletter highlighting remote activities to support the COVID-19 effort began very quickly and in order for them to stay safe while they also supported their communities. And finally, it required us to identify a team of people to work with, as crisis is rarely handled well alone. In relation to the wellness of our students, it required staff from student affairs, wellness, faculty and staff in the hospitals, and the students themselves. Daily meetings to assess next steps were critical for staff who are helping as part of this team for review, update, flexibility of response, and general check-in and revisions. Such communication among the team was both essential to effective planning, but also helped in executing meaningful actions. Students themselves were the biggest drivers of action. At Mount Sinai, it was the student morale workforce, and at Hackensack Meridian, it was the COVID care team. Next slide, please.
So as we enter the marathon phase, where we're able to reach a steady rhythm and a pace. We were able to tend to already establish pre-COVID wellness interventions and think about which interventions can continue. During the sprint phase, sometimes it's easy to get distracted and not maintain some of those wellness initiatives that have already been put in place. It is during this phase that we can pay closer attention to already established wellness priorities and ensure that they are actually in sync with previously set goals and missions. For example, at Mount Sinai, we have a wellness model that serves as a guide that allows us to remain focused and increase efficiency and not lose sight of our mission. We also would like to highlight that even though we may no longer be in this crisis mode, right, that we're more in a steady mode, crises may still arise, and as we've recently experienced, that's sort of like the reality of life, that other crises may pop up, and so it is important that we not lose sight of that, and that we are prepared to support individuals as they face their own crises. It is also important that you already have a very well established infrastructure that can be quickly accessed if urgent needs arise, which is why, again, during these marathon phase, during the phase where there's more of a steady state, you are able to focus on being able to develop that infrastructure so that if you need to access that infrastructure, it's already there for you. So for example, at Sinai, we have a quite developed advising system that includes faculty advisors and wellness advisors. And we were very fortunate that because our wellness advisors were already quite well trained and active, when we needed to activate them to support our students through facilitated group discussions, we were very quickly able to activate that and use them as a resource. In all, it's also important to highlight that in both phases, there are also common priorities that we must always address, such as continuing to convey messages of hope and encouragement, when of course appropriate, manage our students' expectations in a way that builds trust, encourage self-care and reaching out for support, and remind students of available resources and stay in very close communication with our students. Thank you very much. And so please join us for a breakout session later where we're going to be sharing a little bit more about wellness related lessons learned and exchange ideas on how we can continue moving forward in supporting the wellness of our students.
Great, thank you, Alicia and Lori, for sharing. And again, as a reminder, in between each session, we want you to feel comfortable to ask questions that you're thinking of right now, so not to lose sight of them as we move forward in the presentations. If you do have questions that are specific for a presenter, if you can give just a little bit of an acknowledgement to the school's name or to the presenter's name, that will help direct. So go to slido.com, again, hover over the QR code with your mobile device camera, or go directly to slido.com, enter the word summit, and you can ask the question. You'll see a poll versus a QA section on that device or in that software system. And using that question or polling, you can see where you can type in a question. Your name's not required, but we encourage, if you do would like to share your name, we can always loop back with you to answer the question in greater detail as well. And as we move forward in the presentations, we'll see some of those questions generate and pop up on the screen. But we're going to move on next to our second presenting lineup. So there you go. And I should also say, Slido does provide you the ability to vote up a question. So if you like that question and you agree that, yes, I'd like to learn more about that, you can like that question, and those that have more likes get moved to the top of the screen. So that's a pretty unique feature and powerful feature for slido.com as well. So moving next, we will pivot to our second conversation that I'm sure each of us is actively doing or thinking a lot about, and that is rebuilding our community in a virtual environment. Our two presentations today, or presenters rather, will come from Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School and Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra in Northwell. So I'll turn it over to James and Jody.
Hi, I'm Jody Langsfeld. I am the Dean for Student Affairs at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell. We are a medical school that is based on Long Island, New York, 29 miles outside of Manhattan, though we do have hospitals and tertiary care facilities in Manhattan, Staten Island, for those of you not from New York, all around in this general vicinity and area. It took me a while to get a handle of it, not being a New Yorker. But as everybody has said, absolutely in the epicenter and very much in the heart of the fight. And James and I are here today to join you to talk about building community in a virtual environment. And when you think of medical school, I don't think that anyone thinks of virtual education. And I can guarantee you that we most definitely did not think of virtual education, especially in the clinical years and for what was going on. And how do we build a community as things came to a head, literally for us, the Monday of match week, when we are to be planning our celebration with our class for that Friday, something that they have been thinking of and hoping to achieve and to get to for the 3.5+ years that they've been working at the School of Medicine to get to this point. It is a week filled with trepidation and excitement generally. Add into that then this heightening of illness that was going on throughout our community, and being pulled from the floors and removed from your friends, and the discussion of how do we celebrate that, and ultimately how will this affect our celebration of graduation. I think that something that you'll hear recurring through all of our presentations is the fact that you cannot over communicate enough, and you cannot over celebrate enough in any form that you can do. And so that is something I think that we've all tried to embrace and move forward. And anecdotally, I think back to that very first week when we are not allowed to come back onto campus. The students aren't allowed to come back on campus. Where are they going to have their match day celebration? And one family generously offered up their home to have a celebration until about Wednesday of that week, when the city and the state was shutting down, and all of a sudden there was no place to go to celebrate their match day. And so we pulled together a virtual celebration, and I think that we will all be talking about how that town halls and communications allowed us to move forward. So I will pass it to James to introduce himself a little bit and start off on our first slide, and then we will talk to you all about the celebrations and the cohesions that we've been trying to do from our computer screens.
Thank you so much, Jody. I first want to thank Tara, and I also want to thank Jody. It's been a real delight working with the entire team, getting to know people. And that's been one of the very positive things about this entire event, I think, for the schools in New York and New Jersey. We all know of each other, but this has actually really brought us together, which has been a real plus. So maybe if we can move to the next slide. Our overall goals are really just to share with you in a somewhat informal way what happened at our own institutions, how we approached it, what we learned from it, and what we're going to take from this going forward. Because I think in some ways there have been some really positive things that we've gotten from this. And if you move to the next slide, I want to tell a little bit of a story to talk about, to maybe capture some of the challenges that I personally experienced. We'll talk about in a few minutes some of the specific things we did, but I'll share with you one of them. And that was, we decided early on, the executive vice dean who was my direct supervisor, and I talked about, what can we do to check in with students? And one of the things we came up with was to send them essentially a wellness tip every day. So I would essentially email the students every day with something that was inspirational, or something they could think about, or something that they could do. And, it's interesting. I've been in this job for 11 years in this position. And the first 2 years I found to be probably the most challenging, because everything seemed brand new. And I felt by the time I got to this end of the second year, I kind of got the rhythm of it down. I understood match, I understood convocation and graduation. And then this happened, and it felt like initially everything was completely and totally different. And I knew how to connect with students. I had open hours all the time. I knew the things to do when I'm in my office, but everything was new. So we were putting in places things like sending out wellness tips. We were doing things like that. And I had been doing it for about, I guess it was about 2.5, 3 weeks. And we were doing a webinar with students, a WebEx with students at Town Hall. And a student posted an anonymous comment that basically said, can you please take me off of the list for the wellness tips? The student expressed concern and anger because they wanted more information about what was happening with Prometric and felt that our focus should really be what was happening in wellness. So I thought, okay, maybe this is the wrong thing to do. Had never done it before. So I sent an email to the student body and just basically said, I just want to remind everyone that you do not have to look at these wellness tips, and whatever works for you, we're here for you. I got back 136 emails within about 5 hours, actually, from students that said to me that the most important thing to them in getting those tips was that we were connecting with them. So it reminded me that actually what we were doing was the right thing to do. And we really needed to just follow through with the principles that we had used all along in our jobs. So the challenges for us really were, never having done this before, really feeling like we have had insufficient time to do what we had to do. And I'm sure everyone on this call feels exactly the same way. Not having face-to-face interactions with people made it difficult to read what was going on. I have a feeling if I had been able to see the students when this had happened, I would have had a better sense of, how the class as a whole really felt about that. And, as I mentioned, fear of how it will all work. And Jody and I are going to go back and forth. And
Okay, so yes, I agree. I don't think anybody gets into student affairs because the caring and the feeling is there. You have introverts, you have extroverts, and you have everything in between that goes, but to be successful in that. And it's important probably to have a variety of that on your team, but to not be able to see the students, to not be able to grab them in the hallway and say, hey, are you okay? You don't look like, you don't look like you normally do. It was really challenging at first for what to do. But as James said, the goal was still there, was to ensure that our students' wellness was okay, to ensure that our students were getting the needs satisfied that they needed to have satisfied, to ensure that they knew that where you were coming from and that your entire goal was to achieve getting them the information that they needed. I think engaging experts to help with the delivery for us was extremely imperative. I've always worked very closely with our curriculum deans, but I don't know that I've ever worked as closely with our curriculum deans as I have during this time period, because everything was a moving target. And something that I say to our student body all the time is that there's COVID time and then there's regular time. And 4 days in COVID time is about 6 months in what we all perceived as time before that, because the rules change so very quickly. And the CDC guidelines can be one thing at 8 a.m. and they are completely different at 8 p.m. And so we often say, keep your hands and feet inside the ride at all times, because we do not know where it is going to end up and what's going to do, but we are here with you every single step of the way. And your safety and your achievements are our #1 goal, and getting you to be the best physician that you can be is our #1 goal. And being comfortable with things not being done, as we also say all the time, there's going to be some great innovation that comes out of this, and some of that we will keep with us forever. Some we will toss out the window the moment that we can get back to our campuses and get back into the health systems in a safe fashion and do the things that we are going to do. But some of this is an opportunity to be innovative. You'll hear from both of us. We did virtual graduations, and I think that we're both pleased with how it worked out, and our teams worked extremely hard, and our students felt that they got the best graduation that they could get. It wasn't the same, and I don't think any of us want to do it again that way, but there was innovation there and working together with everyone to make sure that we could achieve those goals in a meaningful and memorable way for the people who were experiencing it. Could we get the next slide, please? I'll kick that one off, and then so our community, it is what the school is about. Otherwise, people wouldn't care where they went to school. And each school has its own reputation, and each school is known for different things. And some of our students don't have a choice, and they end up with us because they're going to be a doctor, and that is the end goal. And we want to provide them with the best opportunity, the best experience, and something that they are proud to have accomplished when they're done. We need to keep them engaged. Our student body is about 100 students per class per year. So we have about 400 students in our school. We have, obviously what we call the first 100 weeks, or the preclinical years, and then the second 100 weeks, the clinical years. And they were going through very different things. The people that were primarily focused in the classroom setting, but they were shifting to virtual, which we did not do prior to this. And then the people in the clinical setting, and everybody was nervous and concerned about health and safety and their education and through. So we did a school-wide town hall one week, and then we did individual town halls for each class every single week, because their focus is very different, as every year's focus is always very different. We also did reports from the floors. So we had leadership from the School of Medicine and from the health systems report out on how things were going, the number of COVID cases we had on the floors, the number of units that had been converted to care for them, what was going on in we're a 23 hospital health system, so what was going on in all the different sites that were caring for the patients. And so they reported out, they spoke about our volume of PPE, which we were very blessed and strategically we had to be strategic with, but we didn't run out of. So we were in a very good position for that. But they got those report outs. And what I realized very quickly is that that wasn't the humanistic side of what was going on. And as student affairs, that was absolutely what we were missing. So we then shifted also to having reports out from, one week we had a report out from our Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and our Dean for Career Advising, both of whom happen to be cardiologists, but we're working at 2 different hospitals within our system. And they spoke about that humanistic side, what it was like to communicate with patients through face shields and masks, and not being able to see the emotions on the face and having a hard time reading that. And then on the flip side, one of them being very appreciative of it because it would stop all the tears from flowing out their chin, because the mask would capture that as they were talking to their patients, as they were fighting things. But those faces that they recognized and that they related to and that they knew, that humanized the experience for them and became something that they wanted to hear from. Again, never thought that I would speak to the class councils as often as I did, and I often spoke to the class councils regularly as it was. They were in there doing their jobs, which was representing their classes. And it was key to keep that communication open and moving at all times, sometimes way later in the evening or night than I wished that it was, but it was imperative that they knew that we were there for them and that they could access us. And then we sent out weekly emails, class specific, because again, Prometrics was across the 2s and the 3s were worried about that in our case, but the 1s weren't quite there, but they were worried about their exams and how they were going to do it. So we focused the communication, but we also always gave them a 30,000 foot view of what every class was going through. So those were some of the things that we used to maintain our community. And James, I'll ask you to speak about some of the stuff you did.
Okay, thank you. So one difference in our schools is the size of the student body. We have about 178. We have about 178 students per class. So it's a bit larger. And when we first went out, one of the things that our office has always done is had open hours. So in every day of the week, we have a period of a couple of hours that are set aside where students can just drop in with any question that they have. And that was something that was always very popular with students. I think they felt that we were very accessible. So we didn't know how to do that from a distance, because one of the things that happened is every student was so emotionally overwhelmed with what was happening. We initially were going to have people just drop in, by making calls. We were flooded actually in the first few days, and there was absolutely no way to manage the volume. So what we decided to do is to create a team, not just with people in the Office of Student Affairs, but the Office of Diversity, Admissions Office, our Humanism Center, all groups that had worked with students that students knew. And we asked the individuals who were part of this team to have, initially it was weekly check-ins with students. So the very first week, every student in the student body was called on the phone. It's now gone to about once every 10 days. So, and many of those communications are by text or email. At first, some students thought it was a little bit odd that we were calling and checking on them, but I will tell you what the team reports now is that many students actually call them first or email or check on the person who's actually their partner in this. So it's been really nice for us to actually expand our team, essentially. It's not just student affairs doing this, but it's also other offices within the dean's office. So that's been a real plus, and we could not have done that without it, without that group of people. What's also been good about that is they've been kind of the ears. So if a student is having difficulty, or if there's something that's coming up, they're quick to inform us so that we can help students. We've been having weekly class meetings just like Tara. We've been doing essentially town halls with each class, and they've been separate because the needs have been very different. We've been meeting with a student leadership from each class to coordinate issues that need to be addressed. I mentioned the daily wellness emails that we've been doing. And the other thing that we've tried to do is really to celebrate student accomplishments, not just in the formal white coat graduation ceremonies, but the day-to-day accomplishments. Our school, like I think many of your schools, we were blown away with the volunteerism that our students demonstrated from day one. They were incredibly creative. We've included them, we have them present as part of a COVID course that the Office of Education created, so that they're highlighted, the work that they are doing is highlighted there. So we want them to feel that even though they may not be seeing patients right now, they clearly can make a significant contribution. So I think all of those things have helped us, maintain the sense of community that we have. I'm going to move on to the next slide. These are the big events that we all do, and I think what we're going to do, if it's okay with you, is in the breakout session, if any of you have questions about how we're managing these, we can certainly talk about them all specifically. So we'll move to the next slide too. One of the things, I'll do our list and then turn this back over to Jody. One of the things that we were really kind of a little bit freaked out about, I'll be honest, is orientation. It was just decided that our first year class is actually going to be remote for the entire first semester. So they will not be on campus probably until maybe December, it may be later than that. So we have been working hard to figure out how to create community with them. And this is one of the places, I think one of the times that the resources of our other students has really come in handy. We formed an orientation committee of about 17 second-year students to really teach us, how to do this. So they're coming up with some very clever ideas. One of the things that we're going to be doing during orientation is having game tournaments that can be done virtually. So people can do competitive games, get to know each other, and make connections that way. We're working with IT to actually construct a platform for us so that during the summer, incoming students can post pictures and attributes about themselves, little stories about themselves. And they will be able to choose 5 code words, essentially, that they want to, define themselves. So they could be a runner, an artist, a cook, whatever it is, and those will be searchable. So all the runners in the class can find each other, that kind of way. So that we're trying to create a virtual way to kind of make it so that people can make connections. So that's one of the things that we're doing. We're also planning, we have a learning community process at our school to do both career advising and the doctoring course. And we have our advisors, we have faculty advisors, and we have student mentors that are part of that. We're going to, throughout the semester, the first semester, have the student mentors do virtual lunches once a week with their group so that there is ongoing, the building of a little family or learning community so that when students actually do get back to campus, they know each other. And we're also working with our student groups to plan virtual events. We have a really active student body in terms of community work and service. So those groups have been sort of charged with trying to find things that they can do virtually that they can incorporate incoming students into. So the goal is really, I think the overall goal for us at NJMS right now is really to try to create a sense of belonging for students. And it's what we've always done. We're just delivering it in a different way, actually. So the goal is the same, the method is different. Ready?
Yeah, so in contrast with James's school, we are actually committed to doing everything that we can safely, face-to-face, come the new class. So we are anxiously working and attempting to make that as smooth as possible. We are working for a hybrid orientation, some virtual and some not. Again, we have a class of 100 and about 85% of all of our classes are with 10 people or less. So our concern of doing it completely virtually is the cohesion that doesn't necessarily occur within that. Our contrasting concern is, again, the safety of our students and ensuring that we can make that we're actually trying to stop using the word safe, so I will try to do that even here, to make people as comfortable with the risk factors that they're facing as possible, and to limit those risks and to be strategic and smart about it. So we are planning a hybrid orientation and then hoping to go into our curriculum in the fall. We are absolutely doing virtual social interactions. We actually held town halls, are the keywords at this point in time. I do think that might be one of the innovations that sticks with us. People can do them in their pajamas. We lately have the rule that you can keep your video off, but if you're gonna ask a question, we need the video on so that we can see their faces because we miss them so much. And we also sometimes ask for like some accomplishment, even if it's just that, you know, you made your bed that morning. I'll accept that as an accomplishment. That works for me. And so we can get people to interact and do different things. We are keeping those small classroom settings face-to-face as much as possible. And some of the skill sessions, obviously, again, with medicine, it's hard to imagine. Actually, there's no way that I can imagine teaching the skill sessions not in a hands-on thing. But we've adapted, and we've adapted quickly, and we have kept our hands and feet inside the ride at all times during this experience. And so if that's what needs to happen, that's what we'll do once again. And I hope that, you know, again, even working with James, working with Tara, making these things all work together, it takes a village, a city, and a couple of states in this situation. And the peers and the networking that you've created through anything that you've ever done before, do not hesitate to tap into that. We couldn't have done it without networking with our students, without networking with the people in the other focus of the schools that we've had, and absolutely with each other. And working on this, I think that we've even created some new networking opportunities. And I'll speak for James and say that we're blessed to have been a participant in this. And we hope that some of you will join us in our breakout session, and we can keep talking about ensuring that our students feel the same way about the achievements that they've made that we do about getting them and helping them get to that point. So I think that our last slide is really just that our goals are the same and the delivery is different, and making new friends and meeting new people along the way is always a positive as well. So thank you.
Yes. So I want to thank you all too. And I just want to add to that sense of being overwhelmed that I do still frequently feel is much, much better, I think, now that I realize I'm not doing anything that's that different from what I've always done. The values are the same, the goals are the same, connecting students, helping make a community, build a community, reinforce that community is the same. And actually in some ways, you know, we now have a lot more people to partner with to help with that, which is a good thing. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jody and James, for sharing and lifting us up a bit, reaffirming that what we're doing is the right thing to be doing, just in a different way. And I think that's a great takeaway. Continue to ask questions. Again, slido.com. Go to the QR code using your phone. You can see that a number of questions have been submitted. And if you like those questions, you can upvote them, or you can also create additional questions that will appear and that we will address at the very end. And for anyone that is presenting that may have those questions to answer, you can also follow along by going to slido.com and using the summit code to see what those questions are, just to prepare you for your responses. So our last session, it's my delight to share a little bit of time to talk with my partner in crime, Dr. Angel Palermo from our diversity office, to talk to you and really charge this audience, assuming the majority of us are student affairs professionals, that it is time that we move forward to create a holistic student affairs model that supports what is done so beautifully in the holistic admissions model to bring us to our classrooms, to our communities, a rich, diverse group of amazing humans that all come with lived lives and different paths, and that at the end of the day have similar goals, however highlighted through COVID and the recent additional pandemic of racism and systemic bias among our Black and Brown communities. we cannot afford to continue treating our students with the same policies, practices, and approaches that we have rested our laurels on for these last pre-COVID. And I say that only in the context that, again, our work is to support the human who is here to become the learner in medicine, not the academic superstar that is assumed to never have challenge, or because of where they are coming that they automatically need support. And so to treat each of our students individually, Angela and I hope to bring a little light to the model that has been gaining traction, and I think it is now our social responsibility to bring forward as the integrated holistic student affairs model. So Angela, would you like to introduce yourself, or I should go to the next slide to do so?
Sure, thank you so much, Tara. It's been exciting to work with you in this regard, despite these unrecognizable circumstances. Again, my name is Angela Palermo, and I'm the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at the Icahn School of Medicine. So before we get into discussing how the integrative holistic student affairs model is unfolding at our institution, I want you to know that we at Mount Sinai cannot take credit for the title reference nor the conceptualization of this model. This credit goes to CASDA, which is the Committee on Student Diversity Affairs, a national committee under the Group of Student Affairs. And in full disclosure, I currently serve as the national chair of CASDA and have been doing so since 2018. So allow me to share a little bit of background about the model and its purpose. So in 2017, when I was a member of CASDA as a Northeast rep, we began to unpack the following observation as a committee, which I want to share with you. So we know over the past decade that medical schools have adopted and refined holistic admissions processes. Schools have been matriculating new diverse cohorts of students with very unique, compelling and experiences, perspectives, and potential. You know, many of these students come from historically underrepresented or marginalized groups, and they are in U.S. medical schools, and they come in with very salient intersectional identities and experiences that may not conform with the often unwritten norms and behaviors of the dominant culture. We began to really observe how these new cohorts of students enter medical school with critical social cultural attributes and experiences, as well as varying levels of academic readiness and varying levels of social and cultural capital and varying levels of experience in navigating traditional academic systems that both contribute to and enhance learning, decision-making, and resilience, and have the potential for added pressure and burden on individual students. But we also notice, however, even as admissions trends have shifted and institutional departmental cultures, systems, structures, policies, and practices have not always kept pace with these shifts, and at times failing to meet and support the needs and potential of these new cohorts. So CASDA began to do the work. We began to do the work to develop a holistic student affairs model. We really thought what was missing was the landing pad. Holistic review and admissions created an awesome launch pad, but there was no landing pad for our students to land in to thrive. So we decided to focus on taking a systems and structures-based approach to transform the student affairs ecosystem and all of its practices into a culture that provides holistic and equitable support to enable all students to thrive. Briefly, the model aims to recognize the structural determinants of medical education and the critical success attributes of diversity and inclusion. It acknowledges that for all of our students to realize their full potential, they need to learn in environments that enable them to thrive, to bring their full selves into medicine, and to operate within systems that facilitate their growth and development. But these systems have to be integrated, accessible, navigable, and accountable. It must also provide the model also provides a roadmap for designing student affairs structures, policies, and practices, and you'll hear that a lot from us, that enable all students, especially under-resourced, underrepresented, underprivileged, students to successfully thrive from matriculation through graduation. And that support, and that the support of the institutional mission and goals. And lastly, you know, it's everyone's, as Tara says, responsibility and obligation to be all in, to be a part of this model in terms of working integratively across all specialty areas. So, you know, we had done a lot of work since 2018 promoting this model, you know, going on a dog and pony show across the GSA, and it gained so much traction that we were asked to provide the pre-conference workshop for the March 2020 GSA Professional Development Conference that was to be held this year. And we were all ready to go to provide a 4-hour workshop to actually teach you this model, provide tools and strategies to do it at your institution. And then, of course, COVID-19 hit. and that went on complete pause and was suspended. At that time, we were clearly, as you will hear from Tara, what happened next is what she's going to share. I think with the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic really posed for CASDA, it began to reveal the system onto itself. This pandemic really revealed at our institution what we had in place and what we didn't. And right now, given the fact that we are learning in this exact moment in time, we're aiming to recontextualize a holistic student affairs model inside of the fact that the COVID-19 really presents a burning platform for which we are all experiencing, and allowing and learning from our community at this very moment, what does that model, how has that model begun to evolve and organically create itself at your institution. So I want to make a note that in addition to experiencing the COVID-19 and the racism pandemic, which has always been present and in the background, we are dealing with the intersection of these two pandemics at the epicenter here, where we are having to think through how to deal with white fragility at the intersection of Black Lives Matter against the backdrop of a public health pandemic. It has been quite challenging on a personal, professional levels, but I will say that, today, this very moment, live from New York, we are experiencing this and we can talk about it. And I'm going to turn it over to Tara to take us through.
Thank you, Angel. And it's hard to match her energy, so I'm going to do my best, folks. So let me tell you a story of 4 different situations that we were hit with pretty early on, and I'm sure some of these will resonate with you. And I want you to keep the imagery of these 4 students' stories, and they really aren't limited to the number of students, but rather 4 illustrations of why we are having this conversation today. And so if you can imagine, after we canceled in-person classes and we told our students, if you desire to go home, you can go home, meaning you can leave our residential facility where the great majority of our medical students live, right across the street from our medical school. My office is a part of that building, and go home to wherever it is that you feel safest and be with your family in the moment. And if you do so, you pack your belongings, you officially vacate your space, you will not be charged rent. Now imagine receiving this news as a student that has no home where else to go than the room that they're sitting in. And they're faced with the financial burden of something that's beyond their force. And by not leaving that room, they incur debt, and those that have means otherwise do not incur debt. That's case number 1. The second case is after we've canceled our in-person meetings and our admissions events and our student council meetings and lunches, we notice that our students no longer have access to meals throughout the week. This may be 1 or 2 meals throughout the week that they otherwise would not have. And so by canceling our work, working from home, we have left our students with food insecurities. Our learners have become remote. They are at their homes, wherever that may be, having challenge accessing Wi-Fi because there are 5 to 6 others that are also in the home. Many are working from home, and if they're not working, they're trying to keep their young children engaged in whatever learning is occurring as we've all been homeschooling our children. They're caring for their families. They are giving their time as much as they can to recognizing the needs of their family. They're also the resident expert as the medical physician or the physician in training in the home, and their performance is declining. That's the third situation that I really want you to think about as we talk about this work. And then the last are the students that are active. They are supporting our systems. They're holding up our structures and our systems through volunteerism. They have activated themselves. They are spending countless hours in the wards, doing what they can from a distance to run PPE, to make sure that the pharmacy is active, creating care kits for their colleagues, and just being good citizens. We recognize that work through elective credit. We also bring highlight to that, perhaps in their MISP and other commendation opportunities, to highlight their sense of altruism in these times. Yet there are students that have immunocompromised conditions, and there are students, quite frankly, that do not feel safe in this space. And yet they're not receiving credit, and they're not receiving accommodations. And perhaps it's not because they're not altruistic, it's simply that they are fearful. This is the perfect storm that these last 3 months have created for our medical students. And student affairs is built upon experiences. We do our jobs better based on the experiences and the lessons learned over our careers. And we've had no toolkit for this. We've had no way other than to empathize and also say the same things internally, given our own situation. And it has created a perfect storm that I know I'm not alone in, and Angel and our colleagues on this call aren't alone in trying to manage our students, our staff, maintain an academic program that progresses to create a workforce that is so desperately needed in these times. So I'm going to leave you with those 4 images so that we can really augur into how we can make this system better for those stories. And it's not to just simply correct those, but it's how to prevent those moving forward. I'm new to the Icahn School of Medicine. I started this job in October, and 5 months into it, I feel like 5 months is equivalent to 10 years, to Jody's point earlier today. And I walked into an amazing team, a team that stayed within their scope of work, however, communicated weekly in leadership meetings. And it was because March the 3rd, when we started to huddle twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And these silos represent each of the players at the table, the stakeholders at the table. Our business administration colleagues, those that are managing our spaces, organizing our people, and providing the funding, our students come in touch with. Obviously the work in student affairs, and by that I'll say student health, mental support, career planning, academic advising, and then the program pieces. Enrollment services for us is the financial aid, the registrar, the disability resource office, and curricular affairs, all the things that an assessment lands within that particular shop. And our diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had already begun breaking down the silos in our individual work by having these conversations. However, it was only because of these huddles, if you will, that we could work through these challenging student situations that were impacting just about everybody at the table. And it was in a reactive moment that these huddles became really important, so that we could bring a case forward and talk about things like having access to amenities. What should we do for visitors in our residential hall? By when should we be pulling our students out of the clerkship and the clinical space? And how can we amplify the need for wellness, given that our students are spread across the country? So we had already begun the work. However, it was in a reactive state. And where we really needed to take our time because of COVID is bringing now a systems thinking approach to this. We all have experienced pain points and experience, or pain point events and experiences. COVID-19 is going to be a part of our vocabulary for quite some time, and so we'll have to continue adjusting. But what this situation has provided us is the ability to step back and ask, why are we doing it this way, and how can we make it happen? One example that I know many of you have also experienced at your institutions, how to produce physicians at a faster timeline than our traditional commencements provided in May. And even moving graduation up by a month, 5 weeks, made a difference within our healthcare systems here in the city. And so in a matter of a week, we were able to unpack what is traditional, what is so coveted to be the seminal activity, that milestone event that all students, faculty, and the families look forward to, and to rethink how can we produce physicians quicker than what the schedule will allow. Can it be done? And it did require conversations across our teams to be effective, efficient, and pivot. And it all started with, why can't we? What are the barriers? And until we go through that similar exercise with just about anything that our students encounter, it's far too easy just to say, it's not what we do. It's too challenging to do, or we can't do it. It requires more work. And so in these last 101 days, we have taken a more systems approach to thinking through the events, identifying the patterns that are coming to light because of several students' experiences, really investigating those underlying policies, practices, and structures, busting apart our own assumptions and beliefs that students need step one, for example, in order to progress and to prove that they are worthy of the clinical spaces. we've taken our step and moved it to a graduation, because if we did not, our students could not progress. So to take things that have just been true and tried and part of our traditional fiber throughout our institutions is moving us forward into redesigning our systems and thinking and acting on change. The second approach or strategy that we have used is to, thankfully, using the setup and the infrastructure that CASDA has created for us, is to now take inventory of student affairs. And by student affairs, I'll say that this is a shared responsibility. Student issues don't just equal student affairs. Just like diversity, equity, and inclusion just don't sit within that shop. It should be foundational, a culture by which everybody aspires and believes and supports. And so looking at our structures and the systems of recruitment and how we bring our students into our institutions, what are our cultures and values? How do we then create a thriving community that will take those students through graduation, progression on through graduation, taking a deeper look to our programs and the money and the space and the people that support our organizational structure. And then the last kind of goal or I'll say framework to support this structure is looking at and reflecting, are we doing, or what we are doing, is it effective? And can we learn from our past experiences? So that continuous quality improvement, going back to refine and never feeling that we are stuck in what we're doing today, and always remain flexible to pivot and adjust as needed. And when we look across our shops, each of these on the bottom side of the screen represents the touch points that our students encounter. And again, it's not just coming into my office of student affairs and expecting that we have all of the answers. Sometimes our students have support and needs beyond what traditional student affairs, depending on how your models are, can support. And it's best for our students that we have broken apart our silos and that we all see ourselves as contributors to those students surviving and thriving equitably based on where their needs are as a human and not just as the learner in our institutions. So it really is important that we continue to identify and investigate each of our shops. Where are we vulnerable? Where are we excellent? And then something in between is, where we can continue to develop and identify things to support our students moving forward. Angel.
So the other strategy that we've started to implement has really thinking about getting the information that we need to make decisions and course correct along the way. And so we started thinking about feedback loops. And I want to acknowledge Dr. Leona Hess, who's a part of our team, who has really been building our capacity to think through emergent planning processes and to learn how to navigate inside of very dynamic environments. So we just wanted to offer this to you. It's an approach we recently have taken on. The feedback loop is really a process to obtain continuous information to help develop, implement, and course correct, in a particular area that you want to target for change. And one of the things that we have been thinking about is what does return to campus look like? And asking our students that was a question that we were like, wow, we should probably get feedback on that. As well as our staff. And I think, the one component of all this conversation so far is the staff gets overlooked. And they also hold up this return, what it takes to return to in the marathon and in the recovery phase, if you will. And so, an important aspect of an emergent transformational process is that you can't do it with just a one-time piece of information or a one-time effort to elicit feedback. It needs to be continual so that you can stay responsive in really an unpredictable environment. So, it starts here with really figuring out these the loop has 5 steps, and basically you begin with really designing your feedback approach. What we did was we created a campaign called All In Together. It's really a virtual destination of a variety of different activities and components. And one component we built in was called feedback sessions. And so we decided that would be our approach, and the data of the collection of data, the feedback was that we would have basically provide a data collection structure and put it in the hands of students. So the question was, we need feedback about like, what does it mean to come back to campus? What do you need to feel safe? So we decided that we would have the student groups, and we were specific in selecting and working with our affinity groups. So specifically our PAMSA, SNMA, LMSA, Stonewall. And I want to give credit to really a PAMSA because they really echoed, they spoke up and said, you know, as Asian students, we are concerned about returning to campus and experiencing coronavirus racism and anti-Asian acts of hate. And so we were like, you know what, that's really important to know. And we actually want to know what it's like for all students with specific affinity identities, and so that we can really take that into account as we plan for our return to campus. So we created a data collection structure. We said, affinity groups, will you please conduct a 1-hour feedback session? Here's a facilitation guide. Here's how we like you to collect your data. We then have collected the data. We're starting to analyze the data now and think through a series of recommendations based on all the feedback we got from 12 different student groups. And then we're engaging in conversations with not only the students, but also with the Medeco leadership response team, of which we're giving this feedback to, so that they can actually course correct in their contingency planning process that's currently underway to present a strategy for coming back to campus. Without a doubt, because we have created these feedback loops, every single student group has said, we deeply, deeply are grateful for you making an effort and being intentional in asking us how we feel and what our concerns are, what our needs are, and what our ideas for return to campus. So where we're heading, we're not here yet, is that we're really thinking about how do we apply a framework that really detects and reveals structural racism inside of our school. And so I just want to offer this. This is from the Aspen Institute, and really, you know, again, a shout out to Dr. Hess from our team, who's really building our capacity to really understand, you know, a structural approach to the work that we do every day, all day, and how we can actually be an anti-racist organization and work towards that as an everyday intentional process. And so, you know, clearly you want to make racial equity as a central goal of the work. It is the core tenet through which everything is done. Policy change is the next piece, and it's really about emphasizing capacity building on change agents. Like, where are the change agent targets, whether it's the AAMC, AMS New York, other partners, internal and external to the organization, and really working to influence without authority. And really, you know, creating practice changes and being intentional to really identify practices that need reform, but also may develop alliances that have the power to change those practices, policies, and structures. And I think lastly, and is probably most challenging to do, is really counter popular assumptions that work to reproduce the status quo. And this really means disrupting power, privilege, and hoarding of knowledge, and so on. So we're really working towards this, and we just wanted to offer this as a strategy for other institutions to consider.
Lastly, I think our lessons learned is, again, if we think about our 4 cases that we're dealing with, what we have learned from this is we must be ready for the next challenge. And the next challenge, I don't think any one of us could have imagined a global pandemic to shut our systems down and take all of us out of our offices for 100 days. But by having these systematic reviews of our work, listening into our students, the particular cases that I shared won't be a challenge to have to correct and create a plan in the moment. We'll have those, if you will, a toolkit that we can activate and charge to that student as needed. I think so much of our work in student affairs is reactive, and it is difficult to have a crystal ball to project all of the challenges and the issues ahead of our students and within our communities. But the quicker we're able to break down our silos and truly have an integrated approach to our work, we will be, the student will benefit from it. And certainly as a community, we can continue to tweak and adjust whatever the practice was leading up into that moment to make it even a better experience for our students. So we thank you for being a part of our conversation today. And again, we'd like to have a moment to answer some questions. We'll use the time as best we can
so that we can answer these questions and then pivot into our breakout rooms. And we encourage you to bring your experiences, your stories to those breakout rooms, and let's continue to share and learn from one another. So for our colleagues that presented on virtual events, maybe if would like to give a couple of examples of virtual events so that we could, get some ideas percolating.
Ready to start?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Okay. So, well, we've had we've done a few different things. We've done the formal virtual events, so the white coat ceremony, graduation. I'm sure many of you have done those things too. We've also done meetings with students, the weekly meetings. We've created sort of chat opportunities for students. What we're going to be doing this summer, I think, is creating virtual platforms for people to get to know each other, as I mentioned in the talk. And I think the big challenge for us, because we're going to be remote next year, is creating platforms where students can really get to know the entire class. So that will be, opportunities to have meals together virtually, to be involved in activities and to be involved in service activities virtually. So those are some of the things that we have planned. We have a reserved hour every Wednesday for student affairs that's from noon to 1 throughout the entire year for the first two years. And our goal is that that's now going to become a lunch. And we're going to rotate the students through the entire class so that they end up having lunch with all of their classmates at some point during that year. And just as a way of getting to know each other. And those are some of the things that we're doing and planning. And if you have any ideas, we're more than open to them too, so.
Well, we've done the formal ones as well, obviously, but we actually worked in conjunction with our student leadership, and we kicked it off with actually a leadership webinar for them to help them learn some leadership skills, and then encourage them to each plan an event or two. So we've had everything from our culinary club doing a cooking event all together, and then everybody ate virtually across their Zoom cameras with each other. They've done, in essence, there's another word for it, but I don't know what it is. In essence, it's like an escape the room, but through your computer with the different classes. We have had panels of our alumni actually speaking about their experiences with COVID-19, and also it's a good way to incorporate our career advising to talk about their specialties as well as the programs that they matched into. Let's see, what else have we done? Going through the special interest groups has been really helpful. We've had obviously some other physicians report out on things, but socially they've tried to do events that would bring them together. We had a fundraiser this weekend for COVID-19, a group where they did a marathon run, and for every mile people ran, they donated a nickel. And so it's still finances, but it wasn't as cumbersome of a finance, and people that wanted to participate and didn't or couldn't donate money, they contributed pictures at points along on their run. So it was just a way to integrate the community building that way. So those are some of the ideas that we've done.
Thank you. Alicia, Lori, how about from your perspective? What of your wellness actions will you continue to offer moving forward?
One of the things that we were able to get up and running was a resource navigation phone line. There were a lot of resources within the Mount Sinai health system, and one of the larger challenges is being able to figure out where to go for all, and take advantage of all the different resources. And also during the COVID-19 crisis, there were a lot of new resources that were created. And so what we ended up doing in collaboration with our medical students was creating a phone line that we started, and it's been very effective. It actually has been used frequently to get information about how to get mental health referrals. And so this is something that we're hoping that we will be able to keep in some capacity. One of the things that the students have expressed is that they also would love to have a phone line where there's peer-to-peer support. So this is one of the activities. The other activity that we have implemented is facilitated group discussions. The facilitated group discussions provide support in a group format. We try to gather people together depending on the groups that they belong to, and we probably plan to continue that.
We also, I think one of the things that's been most remarkable is that these activities have come right from the students themselves. And so things like Humans of Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, a group of students beginning a photo and brief narrative website where they can spotlight their own colleagues, their own peers, and invite them to contribute to, sort of a presentation of how they're doing, how they're thriving during COVID. Additional events very much similar to others where the Chef MD Club will cook something, have an invitation to new recipes. We had Paint and Sip several times, which is a students painting together, the paint set sent to them in advance so they could all come together under the guise of an artist online to paint the same picture and then spotlight those pictures. Various opportunities for students depending on what their interests were, and some students wanted to be responsive in a clinical way, but in a research way to responding to clinical questions they were hearing their colleagues, their faculty raise while they were in the middle of the pandemic, so that they would, a group of students were taken under the wing of faculty to quickly review clinical questions and provide data back into the front line of COVID, researching and then publishing very quickly small reports on questions that were relevant at that moment. It really, the ideas that were most successful, I have to say, come right from the students, and we take that lesson to heart when we go looking for what's next. So I invite people to keep your ears open and invite students to be part of this at every point.
Thank you. James, maybe I'll pivot and ask you how do you support the student you never hear from? And I'm kind of thinking to your presentation, you heard from a student, but what happens when we don't hear from students? Do you have any ideas or suggestions?
Right. So I think one of the things, and I was just thinking about the presentation that you and Angel did about the silos, is we essentially reached out to every single student. So, and we have a team that's doing that now. And that has been useful because there have been students that, someone will have contact with and just basically say, this doesn't feel right. There may be something going on. So that's been really helpful. So we have an intrusive model of advising at NJMS. So we actually meet every student at the beginning of medical school, sort of do an intake with them to look at things that might be risk factors for them not being successful. So this kind of continues that. So there haven't been students that we haven't heard from because we've kind of forced it, but sometimes there are students who may not be so receptive to it. So what we're trying to do is to normalize the experience that everyone is going through a lot of stress. Whenever we have meetings, we acknowledge that ourselves so that we make it easier, I think, for students to admit to that. And we also have become really vigilant about the kinds of things that might be leading to student stressors. One of the things that we're seeing is clearly the financial issues that students are experiencing or their families are experiencing. So, we've seen students request to have fees returned, tuition returned. And, when we've explored that with specific students, we find out sometimes that's because their parents have lost their jobs and they're looking for ways of finding money. So I think it's just been, trying to be very sensitive to those issues, anticipate them, and having this network essentially that, it's not in silos anymore, but a network of people reaching out, I think it's really been very helpful. And it's something that I would like to continue. It's one of the things I think that would be really helpful for us to continue going forward.
Thank you. I want to be thoughtful to time. I know we have breakout rooms and a session for the admissions and recruitment theme. So how about we just, I'll choose a couple of questions. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the holistic student affairs, but I'll say our leadership has responded well and is poised to support and continue to support that effort. You have to build the business case and how this and why this is so important for institutions, much like we've all done within the diversity work and admissions work. Jody, how about for your COVID positive patient experiences? How are you supporting students after that experience?
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge and something that we are being respectful of. Our students actually just came back onto the floors. This is the beginning of their second week. And yes, our students are absolutely seeing COVID patients because that is what our hospitals are filled with right now. So, we gave them a lot of data. We did the report outs from the floors talking about the PPE and the precautions. We gave them data on conversion rates in our health system, actually. And please don't completely quote me on these numbers, but the conversion rate amongst the physicians, employees, everybody in the health system, from the physicians and nurses to the people that clean the rooms and the cafeteria workers, is somewhere between 6 and 8%, where in the general public it was somewhere in like the 30%, which, whether that means that we've been blessed and lucky or that people are just much more conscientious of PPE in that environment and washing your hands and contagions, it does, we're kind of focusing more on the fact that that's what the rate is. They've all gone through an increased education on PPE, donning and doffing, and all of the types of things that they need to know going in. There are definitely people that are more concerned. Either they are in a higher risk category or they reside with people in a higher risk category. And that takes a lot of strategic conversation and encouragement and handholding. But in the end, this is medicine. And unfortunately, that's what this is at this point in time. And so this is where that goes. Now, if someone is completely not comfortable, or if it's an accommodation for their own health, that's a different avenue that we go down. And obviously, if someone's not comfortable and needs some time off to figure it out, we would grant that without any hesitation. So a lot of talk.
Right. Well, I'm going to leave the other questions to be addressed in each of our rooms so that we can get our breakout rooms started. If, again, in your online event guide, you have these URLs, you can also write these down, but it's probably easiest just to go to the online event guide to retrieve your breakout rooms. Please join our admissions colleagues. We'll continue the wellness conversations, milestone events, and the integrated student affairs model. If you are seeking CME credit, over the series of the webinar, you must be registered or placed on the wait list, the registration and wait list, because again, that will trigger our work. So please go to the URL as shown below and refer to a colleague perhaps for the information, and go ahead and submit that registration form. I want to say a big thank you to all of our presenters. It's amazing to me how much work has been done and will continue to be done. And we invite you to join 2 sessions tomorrow at 4 o'clock, our Academic Health Center Leadership and Governmental Affairs session. And then immediately following will be our most exciting session, personally, I think, will for the medical student experience session. They have an amazing lineup from all of the medical schools, or for most of the medical schools in the webinar series. It will be a powerful and very enlightening conversation to hear from the students' experience. So thank you all so much, and to our AV and technical teams for supporting this series tonight. And we look forward to seeing you in our breakout rooms. We'll be there shortly. Have a great night, everyone.